Welcome, everybody, back to the First and 10 Club. I'm your host, Mark D, and it's episode 2 this week as we've split things up. And today we're going to focus on the games coming up this weekend and what's ahead. Players we like, dislike, bold predictions, all that good stuff with week 3 of the NFL on tap. So, let's not waste any time. Let's get to it. We've already beat the drum quite a bit regarding week 2. It was injuries. So you have lots of different players, lots of different names, different faces that could potentially play pivotal roles in week number 3. So who are those players? Do any of them really factor into what we're doing this week? Well, again, I'm going to spend my time focusing on players I really like and players I don't like. I'm not going to worry too much about the guys that we're just used to starting week in and week out. Let's face it, at this point, if you have somebody like Lamar Jackson or DeAndre Hopkins on your team, you're starting them. It's that simple. So, who do we like in week number 3? Who do I like in week number 3? Well, I'm going to start out with two teams that haven't exactly set the world on fire yet. Some have a little bit of questions surrounding them. But I think in week 3, both these teams get healthy, at least when it comes to winning football. First is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, it's not that Tampa Bay has this easy game. They're traveling to Mile High Stadium in Denver, always a difficult thing to do. But they're going up against a Denver Broncos team that really is just banged up every which way. Last week, the injury bug hit them particularly hard. Their starting quarterback is out. Their number one blue chip wide receiver in Courtland Sutton is out for the year. So Tampa Bay is coming in there, and let's face it, at this point, it looks like it's going to be Jeff Driscoll. I don't believe Blake Bortles is going to get the nod yet, if he does at all. But it's Jeff Driscoll. Yes, they have Jerry Jeudy there, KJ Hamler, who I think potentially see expanded roles, and Noah Fant. But I just think Tampa Bay's defense, especially with that linebacking crew, has come too far to really let this one slide by. I expect a big showing from Tampa Bay's defense this week. And the other defense I really like this week is the LA Chargers. The LA Chargers are going up against the Carolina Panthers. Again, a team affected by injuries, particularly one injury. Their team. Oh, well, okay, maybe not the entire team, but Christian McCaffrey. The guy who the offense runs through, around, in, out. Look, Mike Davis, yes, he's serviceable. He's a good player. I just don't think that you're getting the same level. And for the people that are like, oh, I like Mike Davis this week. I like Mike Davis this week. I don't. I'm off on Mike Davis. And we'll get to that. But the reason being is he's not Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey is just a talent in his own right. So buyer beware there. If you did get him in waivers, if you are looking to start him, if you have to, I understand that. But the Chargers have been particularly a little bit stingy against the run. And let's face it, they've held some pretty good teams. The Kansas City Super Bowl reigning Chiefs kind of in check last week. It wasn't your typical Chiefs putting up points left and right. So I don't see Teddy Bridgewater as the same class as Patrick Mahomes. And I also don't think they're going to have the same type of success against that LA Chargers front. So those are my two defenses that I particularly like this week. And a lot of times these players that I'm talking about, these are great options for streaming or DFS options. Heading over to the quarterbacks, 3 of them that particularly have caught my eye for this week. 1, the MVP campaign continues for one Russell Wilson. You think he had the Atlanta Falcons. Did great. Then I was a little down on him last week. He went to New England, and he took what we believe to be the best secondary in the league and shredded them. And now he gets the gift of the Dallas Cowboys. Everybody saw what Matt Ryan did to the Dallas Cowboys last week. There's no reason to believe that Russell Wilson doesn't continue that, and he doesn't continue his success. He just adds another chapter to the book of why he is the front runner right now for the league MVP. It's also in on that one, too. I think this is the year of Russell Wilson. I really do. Another quarterback I really like this week is Ryan Tannehill. Ryan Tannehill is going up against that Minnesota secondary that just seems to be a sieve at this point. I know he doesn't have his biggest weapon in A.J. Brown, but you saw what he did last week, and I think you're going to see more of it this week. He'll spread the ball around, he'll throw the ball to his tight ends, but I do expect a very good fantasy showing for Ryan Tannehill. And the third, I'm there. I'm starting to buy into it, which is Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew has a top 5 touchdown to interception ratio dating back to when he started. And the people that are ahead of him have all been league MVPs. So Minshew's doing something right there. Now, DJ Chark is a little banged up. He's questionable this week. It is looking like he's trending towards playing, but you're dealing with a chest and a back injury, separate chest, back injury. So even if he does play, one hit could potentially knock him out, but it's okay. There's enough weapons there in Jacksonville between Dede Westbrook, Keenan Cole, Laviska Shenault. He's going to throw the ball around, and I think that Minshew balls out once again against the Miami defense. Let's face it, it's been pretty easy to throw on or run against Miami this year. Moving on to running backs. Our running backs this week, it's interesting. So for starters, and I'm in this boat, if you haven't picked up Joshua Kelly yet, Joshua Kelly is a viable starting running back on his own. He's not a handcuff. He's not an if this happens. He is a viable starting option. And I have him and Eckler in one of my leagues. And I'm actually sitting there debating whether or not that I start both of them this week. Why? Well, they're going up against the worst run defense in the league in the Carolina Panthers. Then you have the question, too, as to, well, if you're only going to start one, which one do you start? Joshua Kelly has seen 35 touches so far through 2 weeks. That's 6 in the NFL. And against a Carolina Panthers team that just doesn't seem to be able to stop anybody, Kelly's also getting the ridiculous or the majority amount of the goal line work. I actually have to kind of give my nod this week to Joshua Kelly. I think he may end up being the stronger running back this week. And I'm still debating that. I'm going to go back and forth. Eckler is usually one of those people, if you've drafted him, you don't bench him. I think both running backs potentially are viable this week. I think they both can blow up and have a great week. You have a rookie quarterback starting. I know he balled out against Kansas City. I know he looked great in Herbert. But I think they are a running team to begin with, and I think they're going to continue to run the ball. So the fact that you have the ability to start both these players, it might not be the worst thing in this week number 3 against Carolina. And that's not necessarily a week in, week out thing that I would recommend putting all your eggs in one team's running back basket. I also like Jerick McKinnon this week, and we'll get to that in bold predictions. But the fact of the matter is San Francisco was decimated last week. They're going to go up against the New York Giants team that just lost their best player in Saquon Barkley for the year, also because of injury. There's a theme here. But Jerick McKinnon has flashed already. It doesn't seem to matter who is running the ball. And yes, I know they have Jeff Wilson there. I know they've looked at some other running backs, and maybe the ball gets spread around a little bit. Kyle Shanahan is not afraid to use anybody who is capable of running the ball in his backfield. But I do expect Jerick McKinnon to have a fantastic game. Tevin Coleman is out of the way. He's on IR. It definitely looks like Raheem Mostert is going to miss at least a couple of weeks. So until that he comes back, it is going to be primarily the Jerick McKinnon show. And then finally, Miles Sanders. Cincinnati isn't exactly a stalwart run defensive team, especially with Geno Atkins out. But Miles Sanders, I think, gets a little healthy this week in a shootout with the Philadelphia Eagles and the Cincinnati Bengals. So in regards to that, I think Miles Sanders is another running back that I like this week that surprises. I think you're going to see a lot of the offense flow through the running back. Moving on to wide receivers. So heading into wide receivers here, one, you have Allen Robinson this week. I think Allen Robinson bounces back. As simple as that. No reason to kind of overstate it or overanalyze it. It's a strong matchup for him. Cornerbacks are weak. But I do think that he kind of reestablishes himself and has a strong week this week. DK Metcalf, we talked about Russell Wilson. And at this point, if you're talking about Russell Wilson, you have to talk about DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf is a beast and a man amongst boys. And he's going up against a Dallas team that just does not seem to be able to really contain wide receivers right now. They're really struggling on defense. So, in regards to that, love DK Metcalf again this week. And then I'm going to take a look at the Steelers wide receivers. Houston has not exactly been shut down secondary. So I particularly like Juju and Deontay Johnson heading into week number 3. Deontay Johnson still continues to see a massive target share, averaging 11.5, correct? I think I had that right, 11.5 targets per week. That's phenomenal. That is fantasy gold. That is production gold. And going up against a team in Houston that has a hard time struggling or to cover wide receivers could pay big dividends. The tight end position is an interesting one. I'm going to go back to the well here. Whoever plays for San Francisco, I don't believe the Giants have the ability to stop the tight end, and we've already seen how big of a role the tight end plays in the Kyle Shanahan offense. So I'm going to say that whether it's Jordan Reed, if George Kittle sits again, which very well may happen because San Francisco may look at this as a winnable game, and they might want to continue to rest their all-pro tight end. So Jordan Reed in that case, and if George Kittle does play, then absolutely George Kittle, even coming back. But I'll even give an outside shot that given the injuries that San Francisco is dealing with and the fact that they are going to want to run the ball, I do believe you're going to see a lot of 12 personnel, and that potentially could make a viable game for both Jordan Reed and George Kittle if they both happen to play. And then the tight end that I teased in Tuesday's video that you guys need to play. If you don't know who he is now the starting tight end for the Cincinnati Bengals. It's Drew Sample. Drew Sample, I believe a Louisville product, definitely has the ability to be a receiving tight end, come out of the backfield, get split out wide, move around. But really what it comes down to is two things. Joe Burrow loves to throw to his tight end. He checks down. It's a safety blanket for him. He's a rookie quarterback. He's dynamic, and we've seen it now through 2 weeks through various tight ends because there was an injury involved here that Joe Burrow targets the tight end. And the second part to this is the Eagles can't cover the tight end. Now, I understand that Schwartz is a very, very good defensive coordinator, but I've yet to see him show that he has the personnel to stop this. And I'm not talking just, better tight ends beating athletes. This is just straight inept coverage breakdowns. It's like the Washington football team and watching Troy Pike try and make a proper tackle. He just, at this point, cannot get the angles right. He gets juked, he gets moved, he's out of position. Well, it's the same thing with the Eagles linebackers. They have been decimated by tight ends so far in 2020. So, Drew Sample, absolute must-start DFS this week. Especially if you're streaming tight ends, great player to pick up if he's out there on the waiver wires. So those are the players that I am targeting. They're people I'm high on this week. Players that I'm not so high on this week. Now, look, when I say that I'm not high on them, that doesn't mean that I think they're going to drop the ball. I think they're going to have horrible weeks. I just don't think that you're going to see the type of production that we're used to seeing from them. And one of the biggest things or the biggest piece of advice I give people when playing fantasy is there's two types of players in the league. There's players who you draft, and the reason you draft them is because you want them to be the linchpins of your team. So therefore, like when you draft players like Russell Wilson, don't get cute and think about starting somebody like Joe Burrow over them. Russell Wilson was your number one quarterback. Start Russell Wilson. And that goes for your stud wide receivers, running backs. Again, you're not benching Dalvin Cook just because of a matchup or things like that. These players have become matchup proof or they've been the linchpins of your team. Ride with who got you there. And then you have the other type, which is the players who we see blow up from week to week, and sometimes we forget about maybe what the matchup was or who they were playing. And we end up chasing points. And if you chase points, you're never going to win in fantasy. Definitely not going to win in DFS. It's so rare to see players repeat or put strings of high performance weeks together. And again, not saying they're bad, not saying they have bad weeks. You're just not going to see the type of week that you did the week before. So, with that being said, defenses, and I'm just staying away from this week. One, the Denver Broncos defense. They've been kind of they're a crowd favorite. It's not that they've been doing great so far this year, but I really don't expect that to happen this week. You do have Tampa Bay coming in with a ton of weapons, and Denver is just decimated in injuries on both sides of the ball. We already know Von Miller's out. We've seen them banged up on both sides, and I don't think that the offense is going to be able to control the ball enough. And I think that by the end of the game, what's going to end up happening is you're going to see the defense just run down. So even if it does remain close early, I think there's a lot of points put up towards the end, and that just doesn't bode well. The other defense that surprisingly I'm staying away from, maybe not surprisingly I'm staying away from, at least for week one, is the San Francisco 49ers. I don't know of any team in 1 week that suffered so many season-ending injuries, but it's going to be left to be seen as to what this defense is now. When you have lost your, 4 or 5 of your top 10 defensive players, starters, that I understand there's a next man up mentality, but this could be a little bit tough for them to come back from. And I understand they're going up against the Giants, who don't have Saquon Barkley, but look, Daniel Jones, he may be prone to turnovers, but he can throw the rock around. He can sling it. And I think that's what's going to happen this week. I think it's going to be a little bit of a closer game than people expect. And I think when it comes down to it, Giants are going to move the ball. And I just don't think that bodes real well for a team defense. So those are the team defenses I'm out on. QBs this week, again, I'm going to stress over and over again here. The quarterbacks that I'm out on this week, I don't believe that they're definitely going to have bad games. I'm not saying that. I am not saying that they're going to have bad games. I just don't think they're going to explode on the scene this week. It might be a little bit more tempered expectations, and that's important. That's very, very important to understand. And those are Josh Allen of the Buffalo Bills and Aaron Rodgers of the Packers. Aaron Rodgers looks like he's going to be without his top weapon this week in Davante Adams, and he's going up against a team that can be a little bit stingy on the backside. So, playing the Saints this week, I think the Saints want to come back and bounce back and show that, what happened on Monday Night Football, it was a fluke. So I think he's going to face a pretty, taunt defense. And Josh Allen is going to be facing the Los Angeles Rams. And that means, Jalen Ramsey up against Stephon Diggs. So I'm just not super sold there that you're going to see Josh Allen have the type of game he's had in the first 2 weeks. I do believe that the Bills come out victorious in this one, but I just think it's going to be a little bit more of a struggle for them. Running backs that I'm out on this week. Mike Davis, we already talked about it. Mike Davis, yes, you are a serviceable veteran, and I think you're going to get a lot of touches. If he's your only option due to injuries, it's not the worst thing in the world. I'm not saying bench him no matter what. He is going to see volume. He can catch the ball in the backfield. He can run the rock. You're just not Christian McCaffrey. So going up against the Los Angeles Chargers and a very, very staunch defense, especially against the run, they've been limiting this year. I'm just not putting my eggs in the Mike Davis basket. And Melvin Gordon, I just don't see it this week. I think you're going to be able to key in on the run game a little bit in Denver. And because you're keying in on the run game, that's going to make it very, very difficult for Melvin Gordon. I think Tampa Bay says, Jeff Driscoll, please go ahead, try and beat us. And let's face it, I don't know that Jeff Driscoll can do that. Wide receivers I'm out on this week. Stephon Diggs. Again, not saying that he can't have a big game or can't have a good game. I don't think he has a big game. But Stephon Diggs been known to be shut down in the past and has disappeared from time to time, especially when going up against star corners. And it's not all just what was happening in Minnesota. So it's very important to understand that he is going to face probably the majority of the time Jalen Ramsey. And that may open things up for other players, but it's not going to be a good week for him. Don't look for him to bust out this week. I say fade Stefon Diggs, stay away from that situation. The other one is Will Fuller. I don't know what Houston did to the schedule makers, but man, what a rough start to a season. Baltimore, Kansas City, now Pittsburgh. Will Fuller, one, was non-existent last week against Baltimore. And I understand that Baltimore has a phenomenal secondary. If they may be 1A with the Patriots in terms of talent in the back end. But Will Fuller, I just don't see it getting done this week against Pittsburgh. And I also don't see Houston getting it done this week against Pittsburgh. I think Pittsburgh comes out victorious here. So out on those two. Tight ends this week that I'm out on. One, Darren Waller. Again, don't chase points. And here's my reason for being out on Darren Waller here in week 3. If there is one thing Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots do better than anyone else, it's take away a team's most viable weapon. And although I could argue that, yes, it's Josh Jacobs, I think if you take Waller out of the equation, you completely handcuff the Las Vegas Raiders passing game. So I think they focus on that. It wouldn't even surprise me to possibly see Gilmore on Darren Waller from time to time. And the other player that I'm out on for the tight end position this week, I kind of just talked up, Dalton Schultz. I do think Dalton Schultz is going to have his opportunities this year. I think he'll be a viable fantasy play. I think he'll be viable for the Dallas Cowboys this year for all the reasons we said in Tuesday's video, which if you missed it, you can always go back to my YouTube channel and check that out. But this week, he faces Jamal Adams and the Seattle Seahawks. And right now, the Seattle Seahawks just seem very, very stingy at the tight end position. With all the other weapons that are there in Dallas, I just don't see it being a big Dalton Schultz week. So I'm staying away from him. So those are players I like, players I dislike heading into week number 3. My bold predictions for this week. Well, I don't know how bold they are, but, well, they're bold. We've been doing pretty good with our bold predictions, so hopefully they're helping you out, whether it's with, prop bets, whether it's with daily fantasy. This week, I'm not saying that he is your must play for daily fantasy or that he's, you got to look at it. But I think Kirky, you'll like that Cousins bounces back this week. If there's one thing I know from the time he was with the Washington football team and even watching his time in Minnesota, he can be a very streaky player. So I do think Kirk Cousins bounces back this week to the tune of 280 yards, 3 touchdowns, and here's the big one. No safeties. Maybe that's what it takes to turn Kirk Cousins' season around. He gets through a game without giving up a safety, 3 touchdowns, 280 yards for the Minnesota Vikings. That's my first bold prediction. My second bold prediction is at least 5. 5 undefeated teams fall in week number 3. And look, I'll be perfectly honest. One of them's a gimme because there's 2 undefeated teams playing each other. But 5. I think 5 teams fall this week, and at least 5. And I think we're down around the halfway point of undefeated teams by the end of the week. And then last, Jerick McKinnon. Jerick McKinnon of the San Francisco 49ers, 150 total yards, 3 touchdowns. I think the offense is completely built and predicated around him in week number 3 against the Giants. And let's face it, the San Francisco 49ers have proven they can run the ball at will. They can run the ball down your throats. They can swing past the running backs, and they can run the ball from there down your throats. Let's face it, so far no one has shown that they can stop these running backs. And I don't believe the New York Giants have the ability to do it personnel-wise, scheme-wise, belief-wise right now. Especially they seem snake-bitten. I think the Saquon Barkley leaves a little bit of the injury leaves a little bit of a hangover there. My So those are my three bold predictions. Getting into my game picks this week. The lock of the week for me is the LA Chargers with rookie quarterback Justin Herbert winning over the Carolina Panthers. Might have been a different story if Christian McCaffrey was playing, but he's not. So I just don't think there's enough weapons and personnel in Carolina to pull an upset off. And I think the Chargers just by far look to be a much, much better team. That's my lock of the week. Other picks this week, Arizona over Detroit. Detroit just can't get off the bump. And Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals just look too damn good. I think they impose their will. I do think you see Kenyon Drake get going this week. Tampa Bay over Denver. We talked about that one already. I do think Tom Brady continues to get healthy, continues to improve in that offense. And then for Thursday night, Thursday night games, I don't necessarily know that this is going to be a televised event across the nation, but if you're a football fan, it's still football, and we love that. You have the Jacksonville Jaguars hosting the Miami Dolphins. At least Miami doesn't have to travel far. But I think the Jags beat the Miami Dolphins, and I think if not, by the end of this game, heading into week 4, it becomes Tua time. Ryan Fitzpatrick, the bearded wonder, the magic is gone. It's just not there. You're not pulling out wins like you did last year. Whether it's teams have figured you out, they have film on you, I don't know. But Minshew Mania, the mustache beats the beard in week 3. I also, one thing to note, though, which will be an interesting thing, and hopefully it doesn't come down to this. Lambeau, the kicker for the Jags, if you haven't heard, is on injured reserve with a hip issue. So they have an undrafted free agent kicker making his first start tonight. And, well, let's just say in the NFL, it's Murphy's Law. That could come back to bite them. So, but I don't. I think he gets past it. I don't think they put it on the kicker. I don't think it comes down to that because I think Jags handily beat Miami tonight. So, those are our picks. Time to run out the clock. Here we go. A couple of things I want to talk about running out the clock this week. First things first is Mr. Patrick Mahomes. We talked about him in Tuesday's episode, but the more I watch Patrick Mahomes, the more I realize that generationally we are given the ability to have athletes come into our lives that are transcending, that are generational. Patrick Mahomes is that player. You're talking a kid. He's a kid. He just got engaged. He's been in the league now. We're going on our 4th year. And he has embraced his role with the NFL. And not in a way that he's being a bane on it, or not in a way where he's doing anything detrimental, but what he does is celebrate. He celebrates every opportunity he has to make a difference. We talked about how he just remains so unfazed and calm in the game and in pressure, but he's really that way all around. Unbelievably gifted young man. His ability to orchestrate change and be an influencer in a day and age when influencers can so easily misconstrue a message. Patrick Mahomes needs to be commended for what he does. He's a minority owner of a baseball team already. He is by far the richest player to ever play the game in single contract wise. And in no way, shape, or form has he shown that, okay, I got paid, I'm going to take my foot off the gas. I think till it is all said and done, we have the debate now about Joe Montana and Tom Brady and who the best quarterback is. I think, God willingly, if things go well for Patrick Mahomes, and when I say go well, I mean, injuries and things like that he maintains a healthy career, he may be looked at as the greatest quarterback to ever play this game and greatest football player to play this game for much, much more than what he just does on the field. And I'm happy to be able to say that I'm watching that happen in my lifetime, that I'm watching him play and watching what he does. Monday night, you have a treat. I think the schedule makers knew this, regardless of the fact that the two teams are undefeated. But you have Patrick Mahomes versus Lamar Jackson and the new age quarterback. If you are an NFL fan in any way, shape, or form, and you're not watching this game, then I have a hard time believing that you're truly an NFL fan, because this is what entertainment in the NFL is going to come down to, and you should be excited about it. I personally, I can't wait for the Monday Night Football game. I enjoy watching both these players play. They're unbelievably talented. We talked about that. So, a little bit of a bonus pick. I do believe that the Chiefs knock off the Baltimore Ravens on Monday night. I think Patrick Mahomes, who struggled to get the win, got the win, but struggled to get the win against the LA Chargers, comes out with that cool, collected, calm demeanor and shows why he's a Super Bowl champion, why he's a reigning MVP of the league, and just says not quite yet to Lamar Jackson. He's not passing the reins, and I think over the next decade, in all honesty, like I said, injuries, not denounced to injuries, but over the next decade, watching these two players go at it year in and year out is going to be incredible. Finally, or next, okay. I know I've kind of given him some grief. Tyrod Taylor of the LA Chargers. I feel for you. And it's going to go into my final kneel down and talk about this, but you are now out indefinitely because your team doctors, while attempting to give you a shot to help with pain management because of cracked ribs, punctured your lung. I'm sorry. I generally feel for you. The good thing about it is leaders on the team have said that they haven't lost faith in the medical staff, but maybe they should. Imagine if this was Patrick Mahomes before the Super Bowl, before a playoff game, and now all of a sudden they can't play. I don't see any way around it. This is a colossal screw up, and I think you can't just say, no big deal. What's the doctor? My bad. My bad. I just shoved a needle into your lung. My bad. This is this young man's livelihood, and although I didn't think he should have been the starter, you're still affecting potentially, his ability to have longevity in a career, and it's not because of an injury. I understand injuries happen, but this is for a medical screw up. I don't really know what the answer is there, but I know if I was Tyrod Taylor, I would not be happy. I hope they handle this in-house. This shouldn't be debated really, publicly, but I hope they do all the right things and say all the right things for the sake of the Chargers and then moving forward in the season. But wow, just can't help but shake your head at that one. That's just a massive, massive issue, and I just don't think enough is being made about it because it's Tyrod Taylor. And I'm sorry to Tyrod Taylor that that's the case. But like I said, if this would have been Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady, if this would have been Christian McCaffrey or any of the star players in the league, every show, it would have been the entire week they would have been talking about this. First and 10, Good Morning Football, all of them. They're great shows. I'm just saying I just don't think there's enough attention being given to it because of the fact that it was Tyrod Taylor. So, Tyrod, I'm thinking about you. I hope you recover soon. I hope you get back. Again, it's just unfortunate for you. And in my final kneel down tonight, and like I said, it was going to lead into this, I want to talk about injuries. I talked to some people this week that play fantasy, and I understand they're upset. They drafted Saquon Barkley. Hey, I was one of them. Okay? Of course I drafted Barkley. You have the opportunity, those are players you take. You don't even bat an eye about it. Christian McCaffrey, hey, I have him in another one of my leagues. When you play the amount of leagues that people like us do, there's no way you escape the injury bug. But unprecedentedly so far in weeks 1 and 2, You have seen just a plethora of injuries throughout the NFL, and not just simple injuries, soft tissue injuries, structural injuries. And you have to understand that as much as we get upset about this because either our team suffered an injury and therefore it affects our chances to win and be successful throughout the season, or B, um, they're one of your fantasy players and now it takes away from that. This is their livelihood. Coming from somebody who's had extensive knee injuries in their life, and I've worked to get back from them. Now, I never had the ability to have the medical doctors or facilities that these athletes have. And I have come back and I still play sports. All of them, basketball, baseball, football. But every time you have one of these injuries, it takes away from you. You become different. You become changed. And anybody who tells you otherwise, oh, they're either, I believe, lying to themselves or uh, they're putting on face for the fans and for marketing of themselves purposes. Obviously you don't ever want to say, oh, I'm not the player I used to be. But it does. It changes who you are. It changes how you prep. It changes how you play. And I think we forget sometimes that for these players, it's affecting their livelihood. It's affecting their careers. And it's not just all about money for them. Sometimes you have to understand these people have aspirations to win championships, to have uh, records broken, to have the ability to find glory, have a Hall of Fame career. That's the reason why people do this. It's the next step in the progression of goals. It's to make the NFL. From there, it's to have a successful career. From having a successful career, it's to have a noted career. And, whether it's the Hall of Fame, whether it's, accolades and awards. And injuries affect them. So, condolences to the players that are going through this so far this year. And as much as you hear the NFL Players Association talk about how they don't want preseason games and they don't want, preseason, they want less work in the offseason and less OTAs. Look, I get it. Everybody wants the longer vacation. No one's going to turn down the longer vacation. But the fact of the matter is maybe we're showing this year that there needs to be a balance between the two. Maybe teams, need to structure the offseason work a little bit that's not as impactful. But I do believe that it is important, and I think you're potentially seeing this, and only time will allow this to play out, that the injuries that you see happening could be a direct result from the fact that there just was not the type of offseason that we're used to. There wasn't preseason games. For most of these players, they're getting ramped up right now. And as I talked about back in one of our first videos, okay, yes, you may go 100% at practice, 110% at practice, and you think that you're ready and whatnot. But when you get to the game, it's a different level. It's a different level in terms of the competitiveness, what you're willing to do. When you're out there on the practice field, yes, they say practice like you're going to play, and I understand that. But it's a lot easier for you to go, I'm going to just go down here. Where when you're out in that game and you're trying to pick up that extra yard, you want to tweak and you want to go a little bit harder, a little bit further, you want to twist your body a little bit more. Again, these are the first reps that you're seeing for your body for that. So that's my final kneel down today. Hey, I hope you guys liked the show. Come back on Tuesday when we recap the week, when we find out, did I know what I was talking about this week, or was I completely off? Hopefully we can talk about maybe where some of the tips that I gave you helped win, either your week in fantasy or, some daily fantasy contests. I hope we can help you out with that. If you like what you're seeing, please don't forget, click the subscribe button down below, like, share, help me get out there to other people, and let's go football. Thanks for watching.